So I'm going to be doing my presentation on Rudyard Kipling. I'll be going over his early life, his background, including how he was a British imperialist, as well as how he contributed to past and modern literature. I chose Kipling because I really enjoy one of his poems titled Boots, which I will also be using for my writing sample because I personally thought that it had a lot to do with the horrors of war and how it affected the soldiers' mental health, but I found out later from my research that really wasn't the message that Kipling was trying to convey. He was born in India on December 30th, 1865, and died of a stomach ulcer in 1936 on January 18th. He and his family were originally from Great Britain, but his parents had moved to India in the name of the British Empire, since Britain was a big part of India at the time. He lived there for most of his early life, and he and his little sister Alice really enjoyed embracing the culture of India, going as far as to learn the language as well. When he turned 6, however, his mother sent him back to England to receive what she called a formal British education. He had to stay with a foster mother by the name of Mrs. Holloway, who was very physically and verbally abusive towards Kipling, and it didn't really help because he was also bullied in school. Needless to say, Rudyard Kipling had a very hard time fitting in. Once he became an adult, Kipling went back to India to live with his parents because he missed the culture, the language, and of course his parents. During his time in India, he actually began writing his short stories, which eventually became a collection that he titled Plain Tales from the Hills. After that, he went back to England in 1889, where he met a man by the name of Walcott Ballister, who was an American publisher. After the two became friends, Ballister took Kipling back to America, specifically to the state of Vermont, to visit his family and introduce them to Kipling. He also introduced Kipling to his little sister Carrie, who Kipling later married after Ballister died in 1891 from typhoid fever. The couple had 3 children, 2 of which were daughters. The oldest was named Josephine, the middle child was Elsie, and their youngest son was named John. In 1899, the family went back to America, New York specifically, to visit Carrie's mother. However, both Kipling and Josephine caught a bad case of pneumonia while they were over there. While Kipling survived, Josephine sadly passed away, and Kipling never recovered from the grief of his daughter's death. It actually kept him from writing the children's stories that he was once so famous for writing. He later lost his son during World War I when he was trying to enlist John into the war. Despite his bad eyesight, it's something he inherited from Kipling. Through some connections, Kipling was able to get John enlisted, and he was sent out to France, but he was never seen again and presumed dead, though they never found his remains. Kipling wrote several children's books, as I mentioned before, which includes the original Jungle Book, which he wrote in 1894. This was adapted into a movie in 1967 by Disney, and later into a live-action rendition in 2016, I think. The deaths of his children, Josephine and John, had kept him from writing any more children's stories, but he combined the ones that he did write into one book, which he titled Just So Stories. This was according to the article Rudyard Kipling, written by an author from the Biography magazine. He used the title Just So Stories as a tribute to Josephine, who always wanted to listen to her father read her the children's stories that he wrote, saying just so as a reason for him to repeat the stories. He also wrote a very controversial novel, which he titled Kim. It became very famous or infamous due to its controversy, and he wrote it in 1901 in support of British imperialism because he himself was a British imperialist. This can also relate to his historical context, which I'm about to talk about next. Now, I would like to mention that Rudyard Kipling was a product of his time, and given where he came from, he would have been taught to have prejudice over other races, in this case Indians, and while it isn't a race, the Irish as well. Ryan Thomas, who wrote an article titled A Historical Analysis of Rudyard Kipling's Kim, called Kipling's views racial profiling towards these groups. Now, as previously mentioned, Kipling was a British imperialist, so he'd obviously support British influence in India, which is also heavily reflected in the novel. The poem I was talking about before, Boots, was written in 1892. Despite what I originally thought about what the poem could have meant, Kipling wrote the poem to essentially point out how important sacrifice and loyalty to the British Empire was. This can also be connected to the struggles of being a soldier, but Kipling wanted to frame it in a way that made it seem like the struggle was worth it. And that is the end of the presentation. I have the trailer for 28 Years Later down here at the bottom because it uses the poem